was dark, and storm clouds marched along the sky. Rain beat against the gray castle walls. Inside, in a bedroom hung with tapestries, the young King Arthur tossed in his sleep. In a dream, he saw an ordinary young boy, dressed in common clothes, pulling a sword from a stone. Around him, knights and lords laughed loudly, the sounds sharper than a wound, for the sword was heavy and the boy had to struggle to hold it aloft. It grew heavier and heavier in the dream until at last it dropped to the ground with a loud crash that drowned out the laughter. Arthur awoke and wearily climbed out of the big curtained bed. He took a candle to light his way and started out of the door. Suddenly remembering, he turned back to pick up his crown from the corner where he'd tossed it angrily hours before. It felt much too heavy to put on his head, so he carried it, letting it swing from his fingers. As he walked along the hall toward the tower steps, strange shadows danced before him. But none were as frightening as the shadows in his dreams, dreams that woke him night after night and kept him from sleeping. He climbed the tower stairs slowly, and when he reached the top, he stopped and drew in a deep breath. Biting his lower lip, he pushed through the heavy wooden door. The old magician was asleep in his chair. In sleep his face was not so fierce, and the young king breathed out a sigh. The sigh woke the old man, his eyes quick as a hawk's and as unreadable.
"What is it, boy?" he asked, stretching. "What brings you here at this hour?"
"Why, I am the king," Arthur said, but softly, as if he were not at all sure. "I can go where I please." And he put the crown on the desk next to Merlin's chair.
"You are also a boy," replied Merlin, "and it is time for boys to be in their beds asleep."
I could not sleep," Arthur admitted slowly.
"Why not?"
"I have bad dreams." "Ah," Merlin said knowingly. "Dreams." "So I came here," Arthur continued, "though I do not know what you can do about it."
"Why, I can read your dreams."
The old man held out his hand, and the boy went toward him, but did not quite dare to touch those long, gnarled fingers.
"So, tell them to me."
For a moment he gave the problem long thought, and then said, "It is one dream, always the same. I remember little of it, except it is about a fatherless boy, a boy of no special merit, who becomes a king." "Ah," Merlin sighed, withdrawing his outstretched fingers and lacing them beneath his chin, and then added with a chuckle, "I think I know the very boy." Arthur looked down at his own hands, bleached white in the candlelight.
"Well," Merlin continued, "if you cannot tell me more about your dreams, then I will tell you mine. After all, a dream told is a story, and what better than a story for a rainy night?"
Arthur settled onto a low stool and gazed up at the old wizard. A story. He'd come seeking companionship and comfort, but a story was better than both. "I am ready," he commanded, trying out his new king's voice. If the old man heard the command, he did not respond at once. Indeed, he suddenly seemed far away, in another land, another time. At last, he looked at Arthur and said, "I could tell you about any number of dreams, my king. One is about a boy pulling a sword from a stone. Would you like to hear about that?" Arthur shook his head. "I know that one. I was that boy who pulled a sword from a stone and won a kingdom I knew nothing about. That's the dream that keeps me from sleeping at night. Not that story, Merlin. "Let's see," said the old man, stroking his white beard. "I once had a dream about dragons." "Dragons?" Arthur was suddenly eager. "I like dragons." "And well you should, my lord, for dragons are the true dreams of kings and magicians." So he began his tale. There once lived in old Wales, beneath the towering mountain the Welsh call Dinas Emrys, a lonely, fatherless boy who was named Emrys after that mountain. Dark-haired he was, and small, with sharp blue eyes and a mouth that rarely smiled, for he too was troubled by dreams he did not understand. They came to him waking and asleep, strange visions of things that were yet to come. One particular vision he saw many times, a stone tower, mighty and tall, that shuddered and shook and then came crashing to the ground. The dream frightened young Emrys, and so he told no one about it. His mother, the daughter of the local Welsh king, was a good woman. As she had no husband, she tried to be both father and mother to young Emrys, though she did not have the wit for it. She had been taught only lute songs and needlework after all, and prayers. Never once had she climbed a tree after birds' eggs, or travelled belly down along the pond's edge after a frog. She had never once caught a butterfly or skinned her knee chasing after a lizard. So Emrys had to invent that part of growing up by himself, and a lonely inventing it proved to be. The other boys in the village teased him for not knowing who his father was. "Mother's babe," they cried after him, chasing him from their games of Hop on My Thumb and Beggar Thy Neighbor. "Little apron pull," they called, pushing him away from hide in the barrow and tag. "Mother's toy," they shouted, never caring for a minute that he was the son of a princess and grandson of the local king. So Emrys went after birds' eggs and lizards, butterflies and frogs all by himself, giving them names both odd and admiring, like Flutterby and Wriggletail. He told himself stories of their creation, which he made up on the spot, and chanted strange-sounding prayers because he liked the sound of the rhymes. The visions continued, and each time they frightened him. One time, staring into a pond, he saw dragons locked in a terrible fight. The dream was so real, he almost cried out, but he never told a soul. Now, in Emrys village lived an old man. He was the kind of old man who seemed to have been around forever and knows everything there is to know, from reading and writing to how the birds speak and why leaves turn brown in autumn. And because he liked young Emrys, he taught him all that he knew, reading and writing, and how to chant prophecies. Emrys' mother showed him her own practical skills, such as how to play the lute and sew a workmanlike seam. It was this odd combination of learnings that finally brought the other boys to him, not in friendship, but out of curiosity. They would ask him to show some trick with birds, or to tell them stories, and Emrys obliged, glad for the company. But still he did not speak of his dreams. He was afraid, lest they prove true and frighten the other children away altogether. So he made up harmless little predictions, just to amuse them. "The rain will soon fall," Emrys would say, and often it would. "The first spring robin will arrive," and soon after it did. Now, any farmer's son might have made the same right guesses, and after a while the village boys were no longer impressed by him. However, once when he was 7 years old, Emrys found a calendar of seasons and planetary movements in the old man's cottage and read it avidly, cover to cover. He went out and announced to the village boys, "Tomorrow the sun will disappear," and spun out a tale of such doom and destruction that the boys ran home crying. Well, the next day at noon, the sun hid behind the moon as scheduled, a regular eclipse, just as Emrys had read there would be. It plunged the village into darkness for about an hour. To the villagers, it was witchcraft. After that, they called him Demon's Son, and spat at him and made signs to ward off evil. From that day forth, they avoided Emrys altogether, and whispered that he must have been spawned by a demon. So it was that Emrys' days were passed in the small village as an outcast, a boy whose only companions were his mother, the old man, and the birds of the forests. Years went by, and Emrys grew up mostly alone, dreaming dreams he did not understand. Dreams of a boy and a stone, of a tower that shook, of red dragon flags, and of real dragons fighting in the sky. One day, when Emrys was 12, there came to the valley a cruel and ruthless man named Vortigern, who had unjustly declared himself High King over all Britain. He had a hard face, hard hands, and an even harder heart. His past was stained with blood, for many kings had been killed by him. For weeks, Vortigern had been fleeing his enemies, riding north and west, harried by them. At last, he arrived at the foot of Dinas Emrys with a bedraggled army of tired soldiers and a handful of court magicians. The simple life of Emrys' tiny village was changed forever. Vortigern pointed to a jagged peak atop Dinas Emrys. "There," he said, "that is the place where I shall build my battle tower. From there I shall be able to see my enemies when they approach. It is a strong site, easily defended. I shall run no more." He turned to his soldiers. "Gather the people of this village and bring them to me. They shall build my tower, starting at once. And you, my magicians, do whatever it is you must to see that the local Welsh gods are pleased and that they allow my tower to be built." Young Emrys looked on with fear and amazement. A tower? Would it be the tower of his dreams? And Vortigern's banners that snapped furiously in the cold Welsh wind, those banners were emblazoned with red dragons. They had been in his visions too. What could they mean? He did not know, and was silent, for silence was best when facing the unknown. Vortigern's soldiers gathered the frightened villagers together, herding them like sheep, bringing them before the High King. Then mighty Vortigern addressed them from atop his huge horse. "I am pursued by enemies, my Welsh friends. As your High King, my enemies are your enemies. If I fall, all Britain falls. Therefore you shall build me on that mountain a mighty fortress with a high tower, a tower that shall not fall and will keep me and my men safe." So the Welsh stonecutters began their work, and for many days they mined the stone, cutting huge pieces from the sides of Dinas Emrys, and swearing they could hear the cries of the mountain at each cut. Next they hauled the stones with ropes, their little Welsh ponies groaning with the effort. And finally the day came when they built the tower, stone upon stone upon stone, 100 feet into the air until it rose high above the valley. The village boys watched, counting aloud as each stone went up, as if it were all a game. Only Emrys refused to join the game, watching instead from the window of his room. That night he went to bed and dreamed his strange dreams. He dreamed that the tower shook and swayed and tumbled to the ground. And further he dreamed that beneath that tower slept 2 dragons, one red and one white, and that as they slept, they too dreamed. That very night, the tower indeed began to shudder and shake. The mortar cracked, and the whole edifice fell with a mighty crash to the ground, sending a cascade of stones down the mountainside. Emrys was dumbfounded. It was just as he had dreamed. And he was frightened, too, for he didn't quite know what to make of his powers to see the future. But Vortigern was furious that the tower had fallen, convinced that the villagers had done it on purpose. "Your work is worthless," he bellowed to the workmen. "A whipping will show you I mean to have that tower stand." So the Welshmen had to go back to their stonework with great red stripes from the lash upon their backs. For days they labored, and once again the tower rose 100 feet into the air. But that night it was the same. The tower shook and fell to the ground, and by morning there was only a jumble of rocks upon the ground, and Emrys at his window, amazed that the vision had once again come true. Well, Vortigern drove the villagers even harder, and it pained young Emrys to see his kinsmen suffer so, but he was helpless to do anything about it. By the following week, the tower had almost been rebuilt. Then a third time, a great shudder went through the mountain at night, and the work lay once again in ruins. Vortigern's rage could not be contained. He turned to his priests and said, "There is some dark Welsh magic here. Find out the cause, and then find the solution. My tower will stand." Now, these magician priests had neither knowledge nor skill. All they had were impressive robes and a long litany of songs and prayers. In their fear of Vortigern, however, they put on a good show. They consulted the trees, both bark and root, threw the magic sticks of prophecy, and played with the sacred stones of fate. At last they reported their findings to Vortigern. "You must, find a fatherless child," one of them said uncertainly. "Yes, that's it, a child spawned by a demon. And sprinkle his blood upon the stones. Only then will the gods of this land let the tower stand." The magicians smiled at one another and at the king, but it was the smile of those sure that what they ask cannot be done. Vortigern looked at them sternly and commanded, "Then go find me such a child." The magicians shook their heads and looked at him sheepishly, the smiles fading from their lips. "We do not know if such a child even exists," they admitted. Vortigern pulled a bag of coins from his tunic and turned angrily to his soldiers. "Gold to whoever brings me such a child!" he yelled. But even as the greedy knights hurried to find a victim, one of the villagers, a boy named Gwillem, stepped out from behind a pillar. "Please, sir," Gwillem cried out boldly, though he was not normally a bold lad. "We of the village know of such a boy." Vortigern pointed a hard finger at spindly, knock-kneed Gwillem. "Come here, boy," he said, trying to make his voice gentle and only succeeding in making it grimmer. "Come here and name him to me." Gwillem came slowly, but he did not dare get too close to the High King. "His name is Emrys, like the mountains, sir. He lives right here in the village, and he was spawned by a demon. He spends all his time with an old man who talks to birds. He's the son of the old king's daughter and a demon from the dark, so my ma says. He can turn rocks into frogs and can cry down the sun from the sky. I've seen it with my own eyes." To the captain of his guards, Vortigern said, "Bring me this young magic maker." At that moment, Emrys was on the mountain, absorbed in a very strange vision. Under the ruins of the tower, he saw two huge stones, shaped like eggs, breathing in and out, and the mud around them bubbled and boiled. He emerged from his dream just in time to see Vortigern's soldiers come to take him. Turning to the old man who sat beside him, he asked, "What shall I do?" The old man put a hand on Emrys' shoulder and said, "Trust your dreams." The captain of the guard arrived with his men and quickly bound Emrys with the binding of the 3 narrows, wrists, ankles, and knees, and carried him to the High King. The old man hobbled after them, and as the news had spread quickly, he was met on the way by Emrys' mother and other villagers. The old man put an arm around her shoulder to comfort her, and together they hurried on to Vortigern's camp. Holding a horn of mead, Vortigern looked down at the boy, expecting him to tremble or to beg for his life, but Emrys showed no sign of fear. "We will have your blood," Vortigern said grimly, sipping at his drink. "My magicians have said my tower will not stand, lest the foundation be bathed in it." Emrys looked up at Vortigern and smiled. Vortigern frowned. He was not used to anyone smiling into the face of terror, certainly not a child. "Do you understand?" he asked. "I do," Emrys replied. "Are you not the boy Emrys?" "I am." "The boy without a father, the boy fathered by a demon?" "My name is Emrys. It is true I am a boy without a father, but I am no demon's son. You, O king, have been listening to the words of frightened children." The soldiers and the villagers alike gasped. No one, not even the bravest souls, dared insult the High King. Vortigern smiled then, amused at the boy's brave show. But the smile quickly faded. "I will have your blood," he whispered, though his whisper was loud enough that everyone could hear him, "whether you be the right boy or no." Emrys' mother gasped and tried to run to her son, but a soldier held her back. The old man looked at Emrys from the crowd. He nodded his head and mouthed the words, "Speak what is true." But Vortigern had already turned to his men. "Slay this boy and take his blood." "Better you should have my dream," Emrys cried out. "Only my dream will let your tower stand." "Your dream?" In the face of Emrys' certainty, Vortigern was no longer certain. "What sort of dream?" "Ask your magicians what is under the tower. They should know already if their magic is true. But it is not. Only I know, because of my dream." Vortigern turned to the chief magician and thundered, "Can this be true?" The magician stroked his chin. "Dreams can come true," he ventured. Vortigern hesitated. "Untie the boy." Quickly the soldiers did his bidding, and Emrys stood unbound. Still smiling, he said, "Now I will tell you what my dream told me. Dig beneath the stones. There you will find a large pool of water." "Go on," Vortigern said gravely. "Have your men drain that pool, and you will find 2 hollow stones. Inside each stone is a dragon fast asleep. It is the sleeping dragons that shake the earth each night and make the tower fall." Vortigern thought for a long moment, then spoke. "We will test this dream, but if it proves false, I will have your blood." So the Welsh workers removed the ruins, and that took a full day, and the High King's soldiers drained the pool they found there. That took a full night. King Vortigern watched and did not sleep. And if he was surprised by what he saw, his hard face did not show it. For when morning came again, the pool was empty. And just as Emrys had prophesied, there lay 2 great stones. The stones seemed to be breathing in and out, and at each breath the mud around them trembled. "Stone cutters!" cried Vortigern. "Break open the stones!" 2 men descended into the muddy pit, and with mighty hammers began to pound upon the stones. Once, twice, 3 times their hammers rang out. On the 3rd try, like jets of lightning, cracks ran around each stone, and they fell open like 2 giant eggs. Out of one emerged a dragon, white as new milk. Out of the other came a dragon red as old wine. They were as large as 10 Welsh ponies, and at the sight of them, the women screamed. The children hid their faces, and the men cried out in terror. And Emrys, suddenly astounded at the power of his dreaming, opened and closed his mouth, but could not speak. Only King Vortigern looked pleased.
"Kill them!" he cried. "Kill the dragons!"
But even as he spoke, the dragons shook out their wings and pumped them up and down, sending mud and stones upward, as if in a great wind. Then, before the soldiers could ready their bows, the dragons leaped into the sky. "They are leaving!" cried young Willem, uncovering his face.
"They are away!" cried the magicians, making signs with their hands.
"They will not go quite yet," whispered Emrys to the wind. No sooner had he spoken than the dragons wheeled about in the sky to face one another, claws out, mouths belching flames. Their battle cries, like nails on slate, echoed in the air. All at once they advanced and clashed, breast to breast, raining teeth and scales down upon the ground. Wherever the scales touched, fire gouted up. Wherever the teeth dropped, they pierced the earth like swords. For hour after hour, the dragons filled the air with their smoke and their roars. First the red dragon seemed to be winning, then the white. First one drew blood, then the other. At last, with a furious slash of its jaws, the white dragon caught the red beneath the chin. There was a moment of the most awful silence. And then the red tumbled down end over end. When it hit the ground, it shook the earth for miles around, and trees with shallow roots leaped upward, tipped over and died. Then the white dragon followed the red to the ground, straddled its fallen foe, and screamed its victory with a voice like thunder.
"Kill it! Kill the white now!"
shouted Vortigern. As if freed from a spell, his soldiers readied their bows, knocked their arrows, and sighted on the white dragon's neck. But before a single arrow could fly, the white dragon had fled back into the air, banked northward, and was gone, winging over the highest peak of Dinas Emrys. "Just so, the red dragon of Vortigern shall be defeated," Emrys said, but not so loud that the king could hear. As for Vortigern, he cursed the fleeing white dragon, then ordered the red dragon dragged away, and the tower to be built up again. All that day, while the Welshmen worked with the stones, Vortigern and his army feasted on chickens and roasts, sweetbreads and wine. But not even the dogs would go near the dragon's bones. That night, full of feasting, everyone in the village slept deeply. Everyone but young Emrys. He stared out of the window, past the tower, up to the top of Mount Dinas Emrys, and there a hawk circled lazily in the sky. Suddenly, the hawk swooped down and landed on the window's ledge. There was a communion between them, as if the hawk could read Emrys' thoughts. And then away it flew. Mountains and valleys, hillsides and forests gave way beneath the hawk, until, far off in the distance, it saw thousands of flickering lights coming up the mist-filled valley from the south. And, as if in a dream, Emrys saw these things too. Emrys emerged from his vision. "Your enemy is here, O High King of the Britons," he whispered into the silence of his room. "The men of the White Dragon have come. I see their banners waving in the wind." He turned from the window and went down the stairs to confront Vortigern. He found the king by the tower, still driving the villagers unmercifully to finish the very last piece of work. "Vortigern!" Emrys cried. "I have had yet another dream. I dreamed that the fate of the Red Dragon was your own, and that you were attacked by thousands of knights under the White Dragon's flag. And you know that what I dream comes true." Vortigern drew his sword to kill Emrys for his insolence. But at that very moment, a lookout atop the tower shouted down,
"Soldiers, my lord! Thousands of them!"
Vortigern raced up the stairs to the lookout and saw it was true. An army of 10,000 men was streaming into the valley, and at the head were 2 knights on grey horses. As Vortigern watched, one of the knights urged his steed forward, racing alone up to the tower.
"Come and meet your fate, murderous Vortigern! Those whom you have made to suffer cry out for your blood!"
Vortigern ordered his men to defend the tower, but when they saw the numbers of their enemy, they all deserted him. There wasn't a soul, not even his own soldiers, who would take sides with him now. Then the other of the 2 kings rode up.
"Surrender, Vortigern! You haven't a chance!" "Never!"
Vortigern cried, mounting the steps of the tower.
"Never!"
He cried again, screaming his grim, hard defiance into the air. And yet a 3rd time, "Never!" The old wizard stopped, his hawk eyes thoughtful. "Well," Arthur said, "what happened then? What happened to Vortigern? You cannot end a story there." Merlin looked at him and asked softly, "What do you think should have happened?" "Vortigern should have been slain, just as Emrys said." "Is that the boy speaking?" asked the old wizard. "Or the king?" "The boy," Arthur admitted softly. "I like stories with tidy endings." "But life has no such tidiness about it," said Merlin. "Tell me, what does the king think?" Arthur was quiet for a moment. At last he said, "A king should forgive his enemies and make them his chiefest friends. You taught me that, Merlin, but it is a hard lesson to learn." "Being a king is hard," replied the wizard, "but being a prophet is harder. Because sometimes we must turn boys into kings." "Well, what did happen?" asked Arthur, gazing past Merlin to the window slit, where dawn was just streaking the sky red. "Oh, the men of the White Dragon defeated Vortigern all right. Burned him right up in his own tower." "And those 2 knights, what became of them?" asked Arthur. "They were brothers named Ambrosius and Uther Pendragon, the rightful heirs to the high throne. You see, they had come to claim their throne and rid the country of that murderous Vortigern." "Uther? Why, he was the last High King before me. But he was fit to rule, not like me. Perhaps one of his sons will come to claim my throne." "Uther had only one son, though only I knew of it. That son was you, Arthur." Arthur's head went up, his face suddenly glowing in the candlelight. "Me?" he said. "Uther was my father? Then I am not fatherless?" "You had a father, and he was king." "Then I am king by right thereafter, and not just because I pulled a stupid sword from a stone." "Don't underestimate your real strength in pulling that sword from the stone," Merlin cautioned. "There was nothing stupid about it. It took the son of a king to pull out that sword and reveal his destiny to rule all of Britain." Arthur gave a deep sigh. Then, as if suddenly remembering, he asked sharply, "But why did you not tell me this before?" The old wizard's hawk eyes opened wide. "I was not allowed, by the fate laid upon you, to say anything till you were king on your own. That is to say, I could not tell you until you were ready. There are rules for prophets just as there are rules for kings, you know. So now I am king in truth." "You always were king in truth. Only you doubted it. You can thank your dreams for waking you up." "But what of Emrys?" Arthur asked. "What happened to him?" "Emrys? Oh, he's still around. replied the wizard. "Went on dreaming. Made a career of it, I think." Merlin rummaged around in some old boxes and crates until he found what he was looking for. "I still have this. Saved it all this time," he said, tossing the dragon's tooth across the room to Arthur. Arthur caught the tooth with both hands, looked down, and uttered a cry of amazement. "You saved this? Then you were the boy named Emrys?" "Surely you guessed that before now," Merlin teased. "But now maybe we can both go back to sleep, at least for a little while." Arthur moved slowly toward the door, then turned and said, "Thank you, Merlin. I do not think I shall dream any more bad dreams." Merlin crossed to him and placed an affectionate hand on Arthur's shoulder. "But you shall dream," Merlin said quietly. "Great men dream great dreams, and I have dreamed of your greatness." He plucked the crown from the tabletop. "Don't forget this, my lord." Arthur took the crown and placed it carefully on his head. Then he went out the door and down the steps to his room. Merlin watched for a moment more, closed his own eyes, lay his head on the desk, and fell to dreaming of knights, and a round table, and of once and future kings.